Is that pseudoscience that I see before me, my daughter? Nero, what is the difference between science and pseudoscience? Yes, good, but it gets a bit deeper than that. Before we get into pseudoscience and experimentation, though, we need to know a crucial concept of science. Behold, mechanisms. A mechanism is a process that explains how a particular phenomenon occurs or how a system functions. In essence, it explains cause and effect. For instance, I cannot get a mother for my daughter because I am an ugly black cyclops. Haha, I may only have one eye, Nero, but I can see myself clear enough to be aware of how I look. Aww, don't be so upset every time I insult myself. It's just part of my messed up humor. Now, let's move on to mechanisms. Mechanisms are important because they help in the creation of a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a question that an experiment strives to answer. Mechanisms provide a factual, reliable law of nature that you can use to make more detailed hypotheses. Trying to make an experiment without having a detailed understanding of mechanisms will be like trying to launch a rocket without any education whatsoever. You would have a long way to go. Horoscopes and fortune telling, however, which are both popular branches of pseudoscience, are not based on mechanisms. There are no proven laws of nature that can explain how astrology is accurate to one's personality. Nero, let me read your horoscope for the day. You're a competitive spirit who loves to be number one. Naturally, this dynamic fire is no stranger to competition. Bold and ambitious, you dive headfirst into even the most challenging situations, and you make sure you always come out on top. Nero, is this accurate to you? Yeah, well, this is a prediction I just found on the internet. It's not even for your horoscope. To explain that, we need to recognize that horoscopes don't need to be specific to seem correct. Certain arguments utilize something called the Barnum effect. The Barnum effect, named after the famous showman P.T. Barnum, refers to the tendency of people to believe vague and general statements about their personality or characteristics are highly accurate, even though these statements could apply to a wide range of individuals. These kinds of arguments not only undermine critical thinking by being purposefully vague, but also defy scientific thinking by not being specific and not being grounded in actual science, and lastly, being biased towards confirmation rather than trying to refute its own claims. More on why this is a problem later. One is free to believe what they please, my little nugget. Think of it this way. Though a hurricane brings tragedy and destruction, a breeze is a welcome neighbor in the summer afternoon. Like this breeze, ideals only become destructive on a mass scale. Huh? Nero, what happened? Do you feel ill? I'm sorry, I let my guard down. Let's go home where it's safe. Okay, I will continue. For now, we move on to inductive and deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is gathering existing data and using it to create a solution. For example, let's say you ran into a Pokemon. This Pokemon is a violent, mean douchebag. The incident leaves you traumatized, and now you believe all Pokemon are murderous psychopaths that want you and your loved ones dead. Is this necessarily true? No. You certainly have reason to think so, as you have personal experience to back your claim up. However, there are always exceptions when it comes to science. You might have run into the exception, and the majority of the critters in this world are nice little fellows. As such, there is always an exception to anything. And here's a tip. If you're in a test, designing an experiment, or trying to use logic in society with your small cute brain, try to stay away from absolutes. If every issue had a definite right or wrong answer, most of the problems that plague our lives would cease to pester us. Well, not really, Nero. There are always reasons behind human action that explains their behavior. If not justified to some degree, people rarely commit unjust deeds just for the sake of it. Deductive reasoning, on the other hand, is a logical process in which a conclusion is drawn from established facts, those often being mechanisms, something we discussed priorly. In the simplest form, deductive reasoning can be summarized as A equals B and B equals C, therefore A equals C. For example, we know that all gardevoir are mammals. All mammals have spines, therefore we can deduce that all gardevoirs have spines. This kind of logic is very good at testing out hypotheses because we can use mechanisms that we already know for sure, that being A equals B and B equals C, to prove new scientific theories. Speaking of theories, let's move on to the scientific method. In our current level of education, we can determine the process of scientific method as observation, questioning, background research, constructing a hypothesis, experimenting with the hypothesis in mind, and going back if the results do not match the hypothesis, and then lastly, communicating results. Don't forget to repeat your experiment even if it went well. Accurate results are more important than speedy ones. Lastly, a healthy scientific mindset will constantly doubt their every action like some anxiety-filled teenager. You need to act to disprove your own theory and try to remove all bias and attachment from your idea.